meeting of the State Board of Education, September 20th meeting, special meeting to order. If you will, please stand and we'll lead the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the first item is, are there any changes to the agenda that need to be made? Seeing none, and there is no consent agenda today. Before we start the action agenda, I will mention, because there has been some question about how quickly the meeting was called and what short notice that people feel they were given. The department has worked diligently for like 48 hours trying to find out when they could get as many of the people from the state board in the same room at the same time, and this happened to be the day. So that is the reason why we are meeting this Friday morning. Ms. Chambers, is she on the phone, do you know?
And Dan.
All right, thank you. First item on the action agenda are the rules like we went through last week. I would ask if you have any questions as we go through that you ask the person whose name is by the item to come to the microphone. Otherwise, we will go through the items as numbered. And please remember to include pending approval by the governor in your motion. The first one is governing education or educator licensure, and Melissa Jacks would be the one who answers the question if anybody has any. No, you have one. Okay.
Yes, Melissa, if you wouldn't mind coming up, Ms. Jacks.
Melissa Jacks, Educator Licensure Program Manager.
This is such a big role. If you wouldn't mind just sharing a few of the biggest pieces that are being changed here.
Okay, so one thing Ms. Newton had asked when library media has come up on the Act 1240 waivers, one thing we did add to the rules was to make a provision that we could have an ancillary license for library media. So we're going to put that out for public comment, and we would do that basically like we did the ESOL and the dyslexia. So you would have to have a master's degree and then have to pass the test. So that was a big one. Also, one that I've gotten a lot of comment from administrators and a lot of the teachers. We have middle school licensed teachers out there that have passed for one area. And so in the rules right now, they can get a provisional license 1 year at a time until they pass for another area of middle school, and which is fine, but I have those people, and I have noticed it's middle school math that they have passed for. So we've got these middle school math teachers doing oftentimes a great job, and they are not able to, what if the administrator wanted them to teach that resource math class? They can't seek that resource endorsement because they only have that provisional license. So who better to teach your middle school resource math but then, that qualified math teacher. Also, some of them are eligible that they could pass for 712 math, but they can't do that, but their area of expertise is math. And that is the most common middle school area that I've had people calling me about. I have one young man that emails me constantly about that. I've had some administrators. I actually had an administrator who lost a teacher to a school that had a waiver, and she said it was just too much trouble to keep doing this every year. And that administrator told me about that, and so he lost a teacher because of that. So that was another big one. The rest are just things that might clean up in the rules. on the way they're worded things, things that might come before you that we would ask for you to consider before they ever went out. Those are the main things that I can think of.
Thank you very much, that's really helpful.
Thank you.
I know that, this is sort of an aside, but as I looked at the different colleges, it seems that middle school was the one that had the lowest pass rate for people coming out of college. Is it a particular area in the middle school, or is it they have to pass two?
I think it's that they have to pass two, and I don't think the colleges would change their programs of study necessarily, that they have to do anything differently in the programs, but it would allow those people to license once they passed one area of middle school and go ahead and get that standard license and move forward from there.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Pending approval by,
Motion to approve pending governor's office approval.
okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Dr. Moore, second by Ms. Newton, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Number 2, the Code of Ethics. And if you have questions, it will be Jennifer Link that you will call to the microphone. Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve pending governor's approval.
Motion by Mr. Pequon, second.
Second.
By Mr. Williamson, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. The third one is governing background checks. This is also Ms. Link. Do you have any questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Move to approve pending governor's approval.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Newton, second by Dr. Hill. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. The next one is regarding homeschools, and that will be Courtney Salas Ford, if you have any questions. Okay, I do have one. Is Ms. Salas, there she is.
Morning.
Thank you, and I want to thank all of you. These ladies and gentlemen have been working overtime getting these done so we can get them out to the public. In the early days of homeschooling, there was an issue when a homeschooled student started to go to college because they didn't have a diploma from an accredited high school. Is that still the case?
In order to receive a diploma from the high school, they would have to take and meet all of the graduation requirements from that high school and be enrolled. So if a homeschool student, it remains a homeschool student until graduation, they won't have a diploma from the high school. However, if they took some of their courses as a homeschool student and then enrolled in the high school, the public high school, upon graduation, they could receive a diploma. So it's just about the timing.
When they want, if they wanted to go to, and I'm not gonna even ask about out of state, but an in-state school, can a homeschool student who doesn't attend the high school at all, do they have to do anything special to get accepted into the college?
Not typically, but that would be up to the college's admission criteria.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have. Anyone else? Do I have a motion?
Move to approve pending the governor's approval.
Moved by Ms. Deans,
Second.
second by Mr. Peckron. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, the fifth one is enrollment of children of military families. Do you have any questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve pending the approval of the governor.
Motion by Ms. McFetrich, second by
Second.
Dr. Hill. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. And then number 6 is the repeal of, let's see how it's worded here, repeal of ADE rules governing enrollment of military dependents. Do we have any questions there? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve pending governor's office approval.
Motion by Dr. Moore, second by Mr. Peckron. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Number 7 is a calculation of Smart Core incentive funding. Have any questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Move to approve pending the governor's approval.
Moved by Ms. Dean, second by,
Second.
I'm sorry, oh, Mr. Peckron. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, and number 8, public charter schools. That would be Ms. Hyatt, if you have any questions.
I do have questions on this one.
Okay?
And I'm trying to pull it up, so but anyway, my question was, in the rules on 6.11.2, it says, they can only seek a waiver of recess if, and then there's some conditions that follow. If we had a school later come for a 1240 waiver, would those same conditions apply in that case also?
Mary Claire Hyatt from the division. Yes, ma'am. And in the 1240 rules, this exact same language is in those rules, and it comes directly from the recess legislation that lays out the waiver restrictions. So I put them both in the 1240 rules and in the recess rules. So in order to obtain a waiver from that section under 1240, a charter would have to have it, and they would have to make these additional requirements, and in order for an open enrollment or district conversion charter to get it, they would have to have this alternative plan approved.
Great,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
All right, so another question along those same lines, and this is kind of for future reference, and it's probably something that's going to require legislation, but could we do something along the same lines for counseling? Maybe if a charter wanted to have a waiver for some portion of counseling, could we say they had to submit some sort of alternative plan for counseling that met, and then have those qualifications underneath it?
So the School Counseling Improvement Act that was passed in this most recent session didn't include any of that waiver limitation language. So the only existing waiver limitation language is included in the actual charter law itself, which lists the things that cannot be waived. And then in the recess legislation, it specifically said that. So if there was a law that was passed that limited the ability to get waivers, I think that's something that we have started to see happen. And I think it was also in some of proposed legislation that didn't pass to have that kind of requirement in there. And I think since we are seeing more waivers, that more legislation might start containing that.
Okay, so I just think that might be something that we might want to think about in the future. Okay, thank you.
Talk to our legislator about it.
I know.
Anything else?
Yes,
Dr. Moore?
I wanted to ask a couple questions or have you speak on the agricultural school portion of it. I know that was a law that was passed many years ago. Was there a new law that reflects that, or was this just added in?
I think in 2017 there was and to my knowledge, I don't think we have an agricultural charter school. I'm looking at the commissioner. I don't
That
think we
original
have one.
legislation from 2015 was rewritten in 2017, and the 2015 legislation was impossible to really enact as it was written. So we worked with the sponsors in 2017 to make that better, but no one has come forward with a proposal at this point.
Okay, so can a school become a school of agriculture without being a charter school? Or do they go through the district
In order to
conversion?
have the charter school designation, they would have to go through the charter process. So either an open enrollment or a district conversion, go through that process. I don't think there's any prohibition on a school having an agricultural component as it operates in its traditional model or in a school of innovation model. But to have this type of designation, it would have to go through the charter process. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that makes sense. And so therefore, if it was a charter school existing, they could add this on and seek.
Add in the
Designation
agricultural
of it.
component. If they wanted to change their model, they can do an amendment request and they would have to come before the charter panel to do that, because when the charters are approved, both open enrollment and district conversion, the charter panel approves
a specific model type and have a lot of discussion about their model. And if they want to make changes to that model, they do have to come and get an amendment to their charter contract. So they would come before the panel. If it was approved or even disapproved, it would come before you for that review or not review.
Okay, that makes sense, thank you.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion?
Move to approve pending governor's office approval.
Moved by Dr. Moore,
Second.
second by Ms. Dean, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Number 9, Ms. Freno.
Good morning, Lori. Good morning, Lori Freno, Arkansas Department of Education, Division of Elementary and Secondary Education. I'm General Counsel. The State Board directed the Division of Elementary and Secondary Education to draft a framework to serve as a starting point for ongoing future planning for the future of the Little Rock School District. You all, I believe, have a copy of that framework in front of you, and I would like to go over that with you now, if I may.
And Ms. Freno, before you do, just, Ms. Mundell has copies of that out in the audience for anyone who wants to copy.
Okay, I'll get started while Ms. Mundell is passing out those documents. In the event the Little Rock School District does not meet the exit criteria on or before January 28th of 2020, this state board will reconstitute the district as follows. First, order the election of a 9-member local board of directors to take place in November of 2020. Local control will be returned to the Board of Directors, which may have limited authority as defined by the State Board, or which may operate under the direction and approval of the Commissioner of Education, as allowed under the Arkansas Educational Support and Accountability Act and rules. Second, establish 3 categories of schools. Category 1 will be schools with a 2019 letter grade of D or higher, which will operate under the elected 9-member Board of Directors. Category 2 will be schools undergoing reconfigurations, which may operate under the elected 9-member Board of Directions. The State Board will determine which schools are going to be included in Category 2. Category 3 will be schools with a 2019 letter grade of F. These schools will operate under different leadership than the remaining schools in the district, but in partnership with the district. And third, the division will continue level 5 intensive support of the Little Rock School District. And if you have any questions, we will be happy to entertain them.
Okay, since we just saw this morning, does everybody want to take a second to look at it and digest it, and then we'll see if we need to call Ms. Freno back? Do we have any questions or discussion among the members before we have a motion?
So, would that mean
Bring your microphone around.
that the local will be January 2021? Is that, when would that assume that if this was the election of the board?
So,
I think there's a requirement that after a board member in any district, that they have a certain amount of training and
Right.
hours they have to get before they assume authority. So I would, my presumption is, and somebody can correct me if I'm incorrect, is that once all of those people, all of the people who are elected, have received the required training before assuming authority, that then they would assume authority. And as badly as Little Rock School District wants their local board, I would think that the people who are elected would do that in an expedited way so that they could assume
Assume in
control.
January.
And I think
Would that be true?
January 1st, I think, is the earliest they
Okay,
could,
that's what I
but,
was
yeah,
asking.
so it'll be the middle of the 2021 school year. If, you know, if they can do it sooner than that, I don't know. I'd have to look at the specific law to be positive about that. Is that on
Ms.
track, Ms. Freno? Mr.
Well, so on the
Secretary?
elections, we've got Courtney Salas Ford that can talk about, she's researched the issue of the elections. And Dr. Hill, what I would say to that is, yeah, in the past, when we returned Pulaski County, Helena, West Helena, the election was in November, and I can't remember if there were any runoffs at that point, but after the runoffs and the full board is identified, then that training process starts. Something that Mr. Poore, I think, brought up last night, I think I heard, in the CAB meeting, and has talked about this as possible training ahead of time for candidates. I think some of the board members have mentioned that at different times too. So that training process would be before and after the election process.
Kind of creating a pool of applicants and then.
People who are interested might come in, be interested in getting in training in partnership with the district, maybe school boards association, groups like that do that on a regular basis.
Courtney Salas Ford for the division, and Dr. Hill, I apologize, I couldn't hear your question, but following along with Ms. Zook and Mr. Key, yes, there would be training that's required. Typically, they would assume authority in January. However, as part of the reconstitution plan, if you all wanted to set a different timeline, you would just need to include that in there.
Just trying to sit quick and make sure everybody understood the expectations.
Yes, January would be the quickest, and as Secretary Key said, we could do training as soon as people were elected.
Well, I like that, you know, people who are interested can already start that in advance.
Right. They might want to know what they're getting into before they actually get their signatures.
Like
right?
us.
Yeah, like, yeah. Any other questions?
I do, yeah.
Dr. Moore?
So when we're talking about the schools with a letter grade of D or C, we know that there are real challenges in those schools. The department, because it's going to continue to be in level supply, the department's going to continue to support those schools. Is that correct?
Yes, that
What
would
will
be.
that look like?
It would, well, similar to what it looks like now with the joint effort that we are engaged with the district with respect to the RISE training, with respect to professional learning communities, all of those elements that you've been hearing in the reports, we want to make sure that progress is going. So as the needs are identified in other schools, we would work. But, you know, ideally, even with C and D, under this framework, you know, that the elected board will have a role as well. So that's going to be a different element than what we have now. But as far as the support, Office of Coordinated Support and Service, the team that we have, they will still be engaged in the appropriate degree with the schools based on their needs.
And I think the current CAB has really set a pattern for that, because they are at every meeting, and I'm sure in between, speaking with administration about how are we doing on dyslexia, how are we doing on the curriculum, how are we doing, you know, on those different kinds of things that are discussed. So I think in the same vein, that will be done.
Then as far as schools that will be in category 3, just as we talk with parents in these schools or others across the district, I'll pull it closer, sorry. These schools in category 3 will continue to be Little Rock School District.
Yes.
And those students, we're not changing
No.
the boundaries or the zones.
No.
Those students will still go to that school, just
That's-
as far as the support and what it looks like from the
Yeah,
department and
I
the
think
state
the board had made it perfectly clear, and ADE, excuse me, ADE agreed, we want the district to go back as a whole and not be separated with just the kinds of support that they are provided. Ms. Dean?
I'd like to hear more about the Category 2 schools, the ones that will go under reconfiguration.
Dr. Pfeffer may want to come up and help with this, but I think what we're contemplating there is, in the conversation during your work session and other conversations, and honoring the work of the community blueprint. We know there are some things in process with respect to the community blueprint. There is a possibility that schools that have plans under the community blueprint, depending on what the accountability results are, there may be a F-rated school that is slated to go in with one of the K-8 models.
Right.
So those are the things that we don't know now, the schools we don't have identified now, but they are identified in the community blueprint, and we didn't want to abandon that because Mr. Poore is actually is waiting on us to say start moving it forward again with the next steps of the community blueprint process. So it's kind of a balance between what the district is already working on and has identified and what the state board role needs to be in identifying those schools once the accountability results are complete.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Dr. Moore?
Yes, so as far as, the return of local control with the new board, limited power and what that will look like, we're going to have further meetings in the next couple of months to further flesh all this out. Is that correct?
What we envision, what the division has talked about is in the aftermath of the state board decision, there was a Little Rock item on every agenda. It was kind of a standing agenda item for the board on the business agenda. And we would envision that we would go back to that process because, as you know, a framework is simply a framework and the details have to be worked out. And so that's what we would envision, and as different decision points come about, then those decision points would be brought to y'all in that agenda item.
Okay. So as soon as next month, we'll have more information and have more time to discuss.
Well, yes, as we, especially as we get a clear picture of, were the exit criteria met? If not, which schools are still below the exit criteria? But yeah, we envision the October board agenda would start that process.
Okay.
And those will be action items unless we ask for it to be a report. So anything that fills out this that we feel that we want to have a motion and a vote on, then we in fact will do that. Everybody got it?
Commissioner, can you explain a little bit about what the Category 3 schools operating in partnership with the district would do?
Yes. The idea there is that the district would continue to provide some of the, within our 6 systems that we've talked about. We've got the transportation system, we will have student supports, food service, for instance. So a number of those elements would continue by the district, some of the academics, personnel, those decisions would be working through the department, and but all of it would be in partnership with the district.
Any other questions, discussion, comment? Dr. Hill?
So the Category 3 is just an intensive group of
Yes, sir.
that what we're working to make sure we get those
Yes, sir.
desired academic achievement goals that the department seeks for.
Dr. Hernandez group,
Right, well, it's kind of like
the things they're doing.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Do I have a motion? No, the public comment, as I told you before, is at the end of the meeting.
It's not a public comment, it's a question about the agenda.
According to the standard operating procedures, if the board votes to hear public comments, and if it's on a particular item, the item should be heard before the board takes its vote.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I know in the past, it was, they had to notify us a day ahead, but since we didn't notify them a day ahead, thank you for the clarification. Okay, there is a request to speak on the particular item by, I don't know if the 5 people who have signed up all want to speak before, or if it was just Dr. Whitfield? Okay, all right. So we will hear comments on this before we take a vote, if I have a motion and a second and a majority. Moved by Ms. Newton, second by Mr. Packron, to hear public comment. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing no opposition, yes. The first person is Ryan Foster. Hold till the end? Yes, ma'am. The end of the meeting or the end of this group? Okay, thank you. Dr. Whitfield?
Good morning, everybody. I'm coming before you because I want to make it very clear that Mr. Key has been our only board member since you took over the Little Rock School District. Mr. Key has refused to meet with us. We have spoken with the CAB, which is an appointed committee that he put together out of the Little Rock School District community. One of those persons has worked to purchase one of our beloved schools that was closed by the State Board of Education. And we are very frustrated that during these meetings, during the blueprint meetings, the community came out and said to you over and over and over again that we do not want any more of our schools closed, that we want to have a say in what's happening with the Little Rock School District. And despite our many comments, despite what your own report, the people that the Little Rock School District, as well as you, I understand, agreed to bring in as consultants, despite what we said, you still chose to decide to close 3 more schools in the Little Rock School District next school year. You decided to close David O'Dodd. You decided to close Henderson Middle. You decided to close Meadowcliff. No, I'm sorry, it's not Meadowcliff. It's David O'Dodd, it's Romine, and it's Henderson. And the next school year, you're planning to close Baseline Academy. You're planning to close Meadowcliff, and you're also planning to close Cloverdale. We said no. We mean no, but you keep ignoring what we're asking you to do. We don't have a voice, and this plan is unacceptable because you are holding us hostage until next year. Your attorney said at the last public meeting that you could return local control to the Little Rock School District, and you could return the entire Little Rock School District to us right now. There is nothing holding you back. There are no laws holding you back from doing that. I am making an earnest appeal to whatever moral character you still might have to do the right thing by the Little Rock School District. Give our district back to us. You are harming our children. You are ruining our city. You are violating our communities, and you are taking advantage of democracy, and we want it back now.
Christine Alexander. When you come to the microphone, if you'll say your name.
My name is Kristen Alexander. I am a local parent. My daughter is still small. She's not yet school age. We're a few years away from thinking about school. But here I am. I'm here worrying about the future of my daughter's education and of her classmates' education. I don't think I should even need to be here and take off work to voice these matters. But like Dr. Whitfield said, I feel like our voices as a local district are being ignored. I think that there is a misunderstanding in this state. This school district does not belong to you. It belongs to us.
Yes.
Okay? And our voices are very important. And we really, have you actually listened to the things that have been said in all of these public meetings and taken them into account? Because this, to me, looks like an elected school board that is still under the control of the state. It's still, and I understand that there's accountability. I'm not talking about take away all accountability, but this basically looks like anything the school board does locally, you guys can just trump. And you can say, nah, we don't like that. We're going to keep going with our plan. Is that not what this looks like to you? Because that's what it looks like to me. Okay, so the public has made their will very clear, and we are being blatantly ignored. So that's what I want to say about that. And I want to say something about the charter issue. Privatization has no business in our school system. Our public money does not need to go to charter schools. There are two standards being upheld here, a standard for public schools, a standard for charter schools, and that is called separate but not equal. Yes. We have been there. We do not need to go back there. So, the only option is to return full control of our schools back to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Elliott.
Good morning. I'm Joyce Elliott. Good morning, board members. And I'm going to direct my comments to you because I assume you are not the people who put this together. So, since you've not met to do this. And I'm very heartened with the big word draft that is on here, because that is all the merit I can give to this proposal. It should be just that, a draft. And here are the things that are concerns for me. We had a discussion in here where we almost went back to the bad old days with teachers, where we were going to create 2 classifications of teachers. You remember that? And we decided not to do that. Because surely we've come a long way 400 years ago when we decided that we were not going to be equal in this country. We've come a long way. We decided on that day we are not going to segregate our teachers into different categories, those who had rights and those who did not have rights. But what we decided, though, is we wouldn't give anybody rights, for the most part, under fair dismissal. What we are having proposed, what's being proposed to you, board members, is one of the very things we ask over and over with absolute unity. Do not divide this school district. Now, you can get technical and say you're not doing that, but if you follow this, you are. Because what you're doing is basically, once again, if you are not aware of the geographical divide in this city and what it means, what this will do in practicality, the same schools, the same neighborhoods that were okay and nobody was going to do anything to are the same ones north of 630. That is the divide in the city. If you do this, you're helping to perpetuate a divide that was put there deliberately, and if you do this, you will be furthering that effort to keep us divided deliberately. Because all of the schools that you're referring to here, whoever wrote this, are part of the infrastructure of that divide. I don't even know what it means that it will be under somebody else's jurisdiction, not the school board. Why is it that you would ever vote for something where maybe half of a city will have a school board, and the other half of the city is going to be under the thumb of somebody else that we have no clue who that's going to be and what it's going to be? How is that possible to even entertain an idea like that in 2019? How is that even in your thoughts? And I'm not saying it's in your thoughts. I'm asking you not to put it in your thoughts. Over and over, the people of this city said, please don't divide us. And I know people think it's pretty cool and pretty canny to say, we've given the district back to you, you've got your board. Technically, you need to look very careful at who the you is that you're talking about. Be very careful with that, because you will set a precedent of continuing a structure that is unfair to the people in this city and generally in this nation. I don't think you want to be a part of that. I'm asking you not to be a part of that. So what I'm asking specifically, as we ask in the meetings, Return the school district whole. Treat everybody with dignity and respect. That's not what this does. Please treat us as if we are worthy, that we are just as important as every other school in this district. Thank you.
I understand that the live feed has been cut off. Is there a reason for that? When we started our public comment?
We are working with AT&T right now. The recording is still going, so it's just, everything is being recorded, but the live stream for AT&T right now is.
Okay, were y'all able to hear that? It's not that we did it, it was that the people who are carrying it for us, so they're working on that. Emily Kearns. If you will, identify yourself.
Hello. Hi, my name is Emily Kearns, and I'm a parent of 4 children, 2 who graduated from Hall and from Parkview High School. They are incredibly successful students now at the University of Arkansas. 5 years ago, I came here and I stood and I begged a board to please not take away my local school board. And I said then, it was wrong, that you were making things harder. It didn't have to be harder. This was about my kids, and I didn't want you to get involved, and you ignored me. So I waited patiently. I did all the things that are asked of our parents to do. I made sure my kids attended school every day. I made sure they showed up and did their test work. I helped them with their homework. And I watched the schools that my children attended regularly be downgraded by this school board. Not a school board that I voted for, but a school board that you put in place. Your school board. I wanted a chance to talk about Hall and the people of 12th Street. We work hard. We are not rich people, but we are trying. You called this meeting, we had no notice. My neighbors could not make it here. I'm blessed to be able to make it here today. This is not fair. And if this is the way that your board goes on, it's not fair to the rest of us. It is not democracy. You should all be ashamed. All of you. I'd like to say that of my children, they have attended charter schools here in Arkansas, and they have attended LRSD schools. The best experiences they have had as students was while students at LRSD. They suffered in charter schools. I'd love to see a study, some kind of follow-up done, so we can see how charter school students are doing in the real world as they attempt to go to college. Because from what I'm seeing anecdotally on the street, those kids are suffering too. It is not fair to the students, to the parents, to continue this travesty. Give us back the educational system that we asked for. I'm a homeowner. I bought a home in Little Rock because I wanted my kids to go to LRSD schools. I'm not sure I feel that way anymore. I'm not sure I would encourage others to buy a home in Little Rock if this is the kind of school system they're going to have. And that's sad. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Mr. Foster?
Good morning. So, I've been to every one of these meetings. You know, I'm here as a parent. I have a little babe at home, and more than anything, I wanted to come stay here in Little Rock because there's opportunity here as a worker. In fact, that's really why I'm here as a worker, because I work in your factories, I work on your streets, I move your lumber, I create your steel. And I have to tell you, I never want my son to have to work as hard as I do. I want him to have a good education. I want him to have an education that builds him. I feel like what you guys are doing at this point is everything against that. We could talk about the meeting being on very short notice, 16 hours. We could talk about the fact that somehow an IT guy doesn't know how to run a live feed. We could talk about a whole list of things, but at the end of the day, the core of the story is the community had a vision. The community was willing to work with that vision. The only thing you guys had to do was meet that vision. The law even allowed you to do so. Yet we're sitting here and we're talking about what ifs still on a situation that needs to be fixed immediately. What if, they don't pass, don't make it? I mean, come on, just give the school district back in local control. This isn't hard. Once again, this is not rocket science. This is a very simple matter. Because at the end of the day, this community just wants a chance for their sons and daughters to grow into being great people. They don't feel like they're going to have that chance if there's going to be a charter school, which is going to shorten their education. They don't feel like they have that chance when they cannot speak to people. Mr. Key, I hate to say this, but I hadn't seen you for about 4 of those meetings. I saw you for the last 2, last one and this one. My parents didn't have a chance to speak to you and tell them comments and concerns. That's not democracy. You're the representative of the school district, are you not? As it currently stands. Yet we can't seem to get in contact with you. Teachers can't get in contact with you. Just fix it. Just be reasonable at this point. The parents want to have input in what goes on in their school. They want a local school board. They don't want strings. They don't want ridiculous attachments. They want you guys to move forward and just carry out the will of the people. I'm asking you guys to do that at this point. Because, unfortunately, there's only going to be so much we can ask before we just end up saying, all right, we're going to do it our way.
Thank you. Okay, the presentation that was given to us is that we will return the full district to local control. We will have a 9-member board. Yes, sorry. I'm sorry you weren't signed up.
I didn't know, and I asked prior to the meetings to be able to sign up, and so that was yesterday, didn't know it was gonna take place. So, that I would have that opportunity, that time, no one knew. So I am asking whether or not I can speak.
Okay, do I have a motion to that effect? For, if they're not signed up.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Williams, a second by? No, that's okay. Okay. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding.
Thank you. And I'll limit myself to 3 minutes as you've done with others. I guess the first thing that I would suggest to you as a board in terms of a governance model that I think all of you have held true on previous difficult decisions is that when you have something that can be controversial or takes deep thought is to possibly say that this is now out there, and then I'm not calling for public meetings, but I think you should reach out with possibly a survey related to this framework to allow input to come in and give it the due course that it should be discussed, because this is a very important topic to many. Secondly, I will not put anything that because so much of this is a little bit fluid, there's so much devil in the detail type work. But the one thing that strikes me on the category 3 area is that I guess instead of trying to say here's why I don't think it's right, I guess I would share here's what is right, which is the work that we have been doing with the department to work together. And when I heard the explanation, I don't feel like that represented the work that we're doing together right now. That in itself would say that there probably needs to be more discussion about each of these items so that we can dive deeper into those details. Stats that just have come in, if you go look, last night I asked our team to present, what the work is for the helping and supporting teachers through the test model. If you go look at the schools that have D's and F's in terms of the number of observations and then subsequent conversations with teachers, it's unbelievable the changes that have occurred over just a 1-year span. That's because, again, we're just getting our feet in the right place with the department working together. And I worry that this category 3 option will undermine or take that away from us. Again, it doesn't necessarily maybe say that, but that would be my concern. And I would think that we'd want to vet this in a deeper way and seek public opinion. And I do appreciate the opportunity to be able to address you today. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Poole. I think my hope is that when the local board is elected, that we won't have any F schools. That's my hope for these children. Okay, do I have a motion?
Ms. Wood, can I ask a question first?
Sure.
Since this is a draft, if this is adopted, could you speak to the process of what's going to happen from this point on if it is adopted?
It's marked a draft because until you all adopt it, it's subject to change. So that's why we felt like it was important to designate this as a draft document because there could have been elements in here that you all add to, take away from, change. So that's why it's a draft. So if you pass it as is, then the draft watermark comes out and it becomes be written up as an order, state board order that reflects these elements, or would reflect any changes or additions to it. The process moving forward then would be this would establish the foundation from which the next discussions would take place in the coming months. Details on, timing of there's an election process that precedes the actual election. I'm sure there'll be questions about that. The identification of ESSA index reports that come about. So that's going to impact the category. So I think process from here is simply this establishes the foundation and it builds on.
And as we said earlier, that each month they will, we working with them will have different things that we discuss and add to, and like this applies to number 1, this applies to number 2, those kinds of things. But we heard the people in the community who want a local board, and I think the only difference between those is when that election was actually going to happen. And there will be an independent objective committee that will look at drawing the zones for the 9 members. And as I say, by the time the local board, it's my hope there won't be any schools in Category 3. That would be the best possible. As far as number 2, that speaks to the blueprint, which they had, 5 meetings and around the community, and gave the community, not the ones we had, but the ones that the Little Rock School District conducted, and the blueprint is what came out of that.
If in the future that as we start discussing each one of these different sections here, we decided that we wanted to do something a little differently, we could do that within this framework.
Yes.
Is that, Dr. Moore, are you?
That's what I understand, especially around the Category 3. And I think as the department sits down with the superintendent, we're going to be able to get more information, get more input on what that relationship is going to look like, what the good things that are going on in the schools will continue, and we'll get even more support in that regard. That's how I'm looking at it right now.
And I think
So I like the minimum framework now so that we can let those conversations be had.
And the things Dr. Hill and Ms. Dean and others of us were thinking about is like, do they need more whole child approach? Do they need more wraparound service? Do they need more of the community school attributes? Those kinds of things to see what all is playing a part in the fact that so many of these children are in need of additional support.
So this is just a beginning, and it's not set in stone, and we can make changes in the future as we go forward, as discussions go forward.
That's my understanding.
Would be additions, filling in the blanks, yeah. And a lot of this is going to hinge on the reports that come out in October. You know, so what our understanding was from the board at the end of the work session was come up with a framework. And, you know, at that point, I thought I was pretty clear that, you know, we couldn't identify schools because, so a lot of this hinges on the identification of what schools fall in which category. So that's going to be a lot clearer after the ESSA reports come out.
So you were saying,
Dr. Hill?
yeah, you were saying, Ms. Zook, that if there were no letter grade F schools, that wouldn't be a category 3.
There would be no need for category 3 because it will stay of course, there will be additional data that's coming in all the time to find out if they need to even stay in level 5. So that's why this is a foundation for right now.
Right.
But
Well, let me clarify. If there are no F schools, the exit criteria were met. I mean, that's the overarching exit criteria.
One more question. One of the things that we discussed was that when the board was elected, then the department would work with the new board to set that exit criteria. Or the new exit criteria, is that something that would come later as we start fleshing this out?
Yes, I mean, the idea is, under Act 930, the idea is that the department works with the district, and in this case, we're talking about having a district with an elected board, superintendent, and so the exit criteria would be, a new exit criteria would be established at that point.
What is the,
Madam Chair, I would not speak out of order if I didn't feel like this whole thing was not out of order, so please forgive me. I don't know if it's even on, but this is just like what we did. We were talking about the teachers' issues in so many ways. This can't possibly be a proposal with all this fluidity in it. For example, when we say things like, we're going to be in partnership with somebody else, we ought to know who that somebody else is before you vote on this. And the public hasn't seen this. We just got it. We haven't had time to get input from the public. I don't see a need for you to put your imprimatur on this, and you're just seeing it, board members. Why would you? And there is already so much distrust and so much concern in the community, where people think that the meeting was called hastily for reasons that may or may not be true. And if on top of that, if we're going to talk about it more, don't vote on it. Let's hear from the public and then vote on it. Yes. Because once you hear from the public, then you are in a position now to construct your own proposal, because you didn't do this. This is not yours. This is given to you just as it's given to us.
I beg your pardon on that.
I'm sorry?
I beg your pardon on that. Each of the board members individually met with ADE in the process of developing this.
Well, I
We can't
really
meet-
do stand corrected, because the community is under the impression that the board, we had no prior knowledge that the board had seen this. We would have been talking to board members. But how could we, because we hadn't seen it? Why do we give it to the board members? Think about what that means. This is to be a public document. It's something that's so far-reaching. You get it, the public doesn't, and now you're asked to vote on it and make it something that we have to just swallow without having the opportunity to have input before you vote.
Mr. Peckman?
That's what I consider very much out of order. And I know you're calling on this, and I apologize to you, because I know it's your turn to speak. But I have to speak for my community and a lot of people in this city. This is wrong. This is just wrong. And I don't know any way you expect people to keep on just taking this, because you can. Because you can. Does that make this okay? So I'm asking you specifically to take this as a draft as it is, just as we are forced to take it, as the draft as it is, and let's vote on it when you hear from the people in this city. That's all I'm asking.
Mr. Peckron?
I honestly was listening to Senator Elliott and forgot what I was going to say.
Okay.
may I clarify, Madam Chair, if I can clarify, we had conversations with board members as we do on many topics. I want to make sure there's not a perception that this was distributed to board members prior to today, because it was not. There were concepts that were discussed based out of conversation from last Wednesday night's work session. It's right up until this morning that those concepts were being clarified and put on paper. Conversations with the board members were about concepts and clarifications that were discussed at the work session in trying to achieve what you all asked us to do, which is come up with a framework. So just wanted to make sure that that it's clear that this document was not something that came out prior to this morning.
No, I'm sorry if I left that impression. I just knew that each board member had been given an opportunity separately to give input and clarify anything that was still of confusion. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the proposed framework.
I have a motion by Dr. Moore, second. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Second by Mr. Packron. What in the world? Dr. Hill? We have a motion and a second, and it's time for discussion before we vote.
Yeah. I want to, as we process this, what we're going to do here, that we take into consideration that understanding to move the district forward with the current situation of the superintendent, of the progress that we have made. Not saying that this is not the best approach based on what we have, information that we have received or not, that we be sensitive to the community at this point and make sure that this is something that we have. And I think the frustrating thing about this, total transparency, is that we were hopeful that in our meetings previously that we could have got this type of, but to the defense, we didn't have this information to put out there at those previous meetings. I mean, so as I look here and process this information, I'm trying to say what, as board members, if when we went out to our discussion meetings and we sit there as representatives from this district, we talked about returning to local control, the process. And I guess my question is, should this have been included in those meetings? But we didn't know that at the time because the framework was built from that discussion. And so I want, and I only made 2 of those because I was at other community meetings. And so I think that's something we need to take into consideration out of concern. And as a board member representing this district, those are my concerns.
Okay, I appreciate that. Mr. Packron?
I want to just say that I feel like this is still a very early step in a process. I echo what Dr. Hill said. I wish, it's kind of chicken and the egg. We didn't have a framework until there were meetings. I think there needs to be additional meetings where this is discussed further. And I would urge us to have those meetings. I think there's a lot of things in here that are fluid, but I think this is a starting point. And I want to move ahead, and we're not going to move ahead if we don't start somewhere.
Right.
But I do think there's a lot of things, there are a lot of things that the community is bringing up that are valid points. I want to hear them in the context of this framework, but if we don't at least start moving this process forward somehow, we're just going to spin our wheels up here as a board. But I see everything in this as a framework, not a final document. I think it's all subject to change.
Okay, thank you.
Could we, just a question of order, could we do this similar to how when we put rules out for public comment, could we do the same sort of thing on the website, put it out for public comment also?
You know, I think that once we make a decision up here today, if this is going to be our springboard, then being sure as many people as we have our October meeting, our November meeting, our December meeting, and we fill in the blanks, for lack of a better word, that is not a good word, that yes, I see no reason why this can't be, and it's been distributed to the press, so it'll be in the print media, it'll be in the on television, it'll be in the radio, and for those people who have access to computers, they can do it that way. And then if people who know that their neighbors do not have that access, they can share it with them. And as we put this as an action item on each of the succeeding meetings, yes, I think that's true, Ms. Newton. Have a motion.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question? This is
sure,
Susan.
Ms. Chambers.
I apologize because we went to the motion before I got a chance to ask this, so it may be too late, but I just wanted to say it anyway.
Yeah, since I can't see your hand, feel free to interrupt.
Sorry. Well, I do understand the consternation because depending on where we sit, we all understand these words to mean different things. They can go in different directions. They're intended to be written in a way where they can go in different directions, but we feel differently based on what that might be interpreted to mean. And particularly on Category 3, I'm not saying there aren't issues with all of these where people would want more clarity, but I wondered if we could entertain just slight changes in words, as words do matter. On Category 3, on the sentence it says these schools will operate under different leadership than the remaining schools in the district, but in partnership with the district. I wondered if the board would entertain these schools will operate under additional leadership than the remaining schools in the district and in partnership with the district. That represents more of my understanding of what we intended, which is under level 5. It's ensuring that the leadership that is needed is there, but it's definitely, very definitely part of the district, not an exception. And it may be too late, but that represents my interpretation of the words.
Okay, so you're saying on number 3 where it says these schools will operate under additional leadership, and then what did you say after that?
These schools will operate under additional leadership from I don't know if it's from or than the remaining schools in the district, and to me the but almost makes it feel like a carve out, and it's not, in my opinion, not intended to be a carve out. Just reflect additional support.
Okay, I'll have to see. Dr. Moore, are you willing to amend your motion to include the change in Category 3 where it's operate under additional leadership than the remaining schools and in partnership with the district?
I'm going to keep the motion as stands.
Okay, she wants to keep the motion as is.
But I think, again, there's many more conversations to be had. I want the department to come back in October after discussing with the district.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Okay.
I was just going to echo what Dr. Hill stated and just reiterate that we've listened to the community and we've taken all the feedback and we've processed it at every meeting. We've processed this. This framework, for the most part, is our response and what we've been hearing from the community. However, I do believe that as we move forward, even more so, it's important for us to hear from the community and to gather input and to ensure that all of our community members are a part of fleshing this out. And as Mr. Peckland stated, and Ms. Zook, we need to be able to move forward from someplace. I think it's important that we have a starting place, and that as we begin with inclusion, and we begin with hearing out what the community has to say and making sure that everyone is a part of this process. And I think that is going to be extremely important as we move forward, that we continue to hear the voice of the community and continue to gather input as we move forward and as we flesh things out.
And I want to be sure that everybody understands that there have been those who have taken their valuable time and come to the meetings, and we have heard what they said, but we got a lot of input from people who did not come to the meetings. They came to us one-on-one, they came to us by telephone, so there is a lot of other voices that have also been heard in addition to those in the public meetings. So I have a motion and a second.
One more point.
Okay, Dr. Hill?
One more comment. I just make sure for point of clarification, what were you suggesting on the comment? I mean, did I?
Just that,
No, I was asking for clarification from Ms. Newton on what she was, on the more information that could be gathered. How would
just whenever we usually release rules for public comment, there's an avenue for, through the web or web address or something of that sort for the public to make public comments specifically to individual portions of a rule. And so I think, if we could do that and make that accessible to the public, that would be an avenue that almost anyone could make a comment, whether they could come to a meeting of this sort or just have access to a phone.
And I think one thing, because when we have our regularly scheduled meetings, those agendas go out at least a week ahead of time. So anything that's put on those agendas will be readily accessible to the public. And so anything we're going to vote on as we fill, if this passes as we fill it out, would give that opportunity to contact us or come to the meeting or email us in some way. So we are getting that feedback, yes.
Commissioner, could
Yeah,
you?
Ms. Zook,
sorry.
I think that ADE LRSD feedback email address that we had is still live. If it's
Okay.
not, I'll make sure that it's turned back on, but I think it's still live and available. I think that would be an already established
Good. Okay.
avenue for folks to continue to provide feedback as
Thank
we
you.
move forward.
And I assume this will be posted on the website?
Yeah, we'll make sure it gets
With an
posted.
invitation to comment at that email address.
Sure, we can do that.
So in this working document or draft document, what we're saying, this framework we've created from the meetings that we've had, I want to make sure everybody is clear, and is fluid in nature to come back to exactly to what the found game plan will be.
Right.
This is not practice, but this is the framework from which we're.
And the downside is that we can get together in the meetings, we can talk and everything, but our final discussions need to be in public, and that's what we're having right now.
So when Ms. Chambers was mentioning additional leadership over different leadership, those things are just which are fluid, that could still be. I mean, that
It's
could.
wordsmithing, and I have a motion by Dr. Moore, and I've forgotten, was it Mr. Packron, second? We do a roll call.
Mr. Peckron.
Aye.
Dr. Hill. Mr. Williamson.
Aye.
Ms. Chambers.
Yes?
Ms. McFetridge.
Yes.
Dr. Moore.
Yes.
Ms. Newton.
Yes.
Ms. Dean.
Yes.
Did you vote, Dr. Hill?
Yes, I'm going yes.
Okay, The motion passes unanimously. We're going to take a brief.
I have an addition.
We're going to take a brief break because the only way that we can get this back up and live streamed is with a break.
Okay.
So we're going to take a break and then we'll come back into session. It's 10:15. We'll come back at 10:20. Dan will 10 minutes give you the time you need.
I'm hoping so. The AET wants me to restart all of our equipment so they can put the page back up and going on there. Their page is what public access is.
Okay. So.
If I get it rebooted, then I can call them and ask if they're getting the feed again to push it back out.
So are you ready for that now, or do you want to, or,
Whatever you do, it's the only thing I'm making sure everybody knows is that, and we'll stop this recording, and then when we come back, it'll be a separate recording as well.
so when they look at it on archive, what you're saying is they'll have to look at two different recordings?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Continue. I have an additional motion I want to go ahead and make since it's been
Okay,
recorded.
we have an additional motion.
I move that we instruct the commissioner as a board to notify the Little Rock Education Association. I put a lot of thought into this, have a lot of conversations, and I think that at the end of the contract, the district should no longer recognize the Little Rock Education Association as the exclusive bargaining representative of the district. Little Rock is the only district in the state with this type of relationship. And I believe that the teachers and the districts need to continue to be a part of a professional.
I'm going to clear the room if you can't control yourself. Well,
This is a shame. Walton's got all this money and buying every last one of you, including you, Mr. Key.
The contract is to expire on October 31st, and I'm having conversations with many in the community, and I believe that now is the time to go ahead and get that in motion. I believe that Little Rock School District teachers can be just like any other teacher in the state who joins a professional organization but is not recognized by, there's no negotiating within the district, and so I move that we make a motion to do that. In addition to this, we know that Act 728 requires the district to create a personnel policy committee, just like every other district in the state. I believe that the district needs to continue moving forward, but to hire a third party to create that personnel policy committee. In districts that I've worked in, that policy committee is effective and important for all teachers to have a voice, and I think it's important that we have a third party to do that in the coming months so that that is up and running soon.
okay, does everyone understand the motion? Do I have this?
I can restate it.
That's right.
I move that we instruct the commissioner to notify the Little Rock Education Association that upon termination of the contract on October 31st between the Little Rock School District and the Education Association, the Little Rock District will no longer recognize the Education Association as the exclusive bargaining representative of the district and its employees. In addition, I move that we ask the district, in accordance to Act 728, to create a personnel policy committee and contract with a third party to establish that committee as soon as possible so that teachers, just like every other teacher in the state, has a voice in their district. Okay.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
You should divide that motion, that's two different subjects. You have to have a divided motion on that. You can't vote on two different things in the same motion, or you shouldn't.
Ms. Brino, do we need two motions, or is one sufficient?
Let me consult with our parliamentarian.
Okay.
I don't care.
I do not see a problem with one motion. I mean, it would be up to the person making the motion if she wanted to break it up into components, but there's no problem with one motion.
Okay. And Act 728 is in fact a law that was passed by the legislature, is that correct?
Yes, Act 728 of 2019, yes.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Dr. Moore, second by Ms. McFettridge. A roll call.
We could take public comment before you vote on this motion. There are people here that would like to speak on that. We didn't have any notice, but we'd be happy to speak now.
We have a request from the audience to speak before we vote on the motion. Do I have a motion to do that?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Hill, second by Mr. Williamson. Ms. Nolan?
Can we take a short break before we do public comment?
Yes.
5 minutes.
We need to vote on that? We just had a motion in a second.
Oh, sorry, thank you, Mr. Williamson. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. We'll take a break until 10:30. It's 10:21.